I think we'll get started, Ned, if you want to join us. So yeah, today I've got Ned from Great Question. Ned's recently raised 2.4. I get mixed in the AUD USD. I've seen multiple numbers, but a couple of $1 million to help really go after this product research ops problem and domain. And so what I'm really interested about is like what is on the forefront of product research ops. I think for those of us who are in product, on our mind at the moment is this whole ops trend, question, whatever you want to call it. And I think what's really interesting for everyone is we're going to chat today about how do you get your customers involved in every release? How do you get a conversation going with them? Because strangely, it's harder than it should be, or harder than it sounds. It's quite a simple question. Ned, if you just want to flick to the next slide. So I am Scott. For those that don't know me, I'm the CEO and founder of Terram. Terram's a product development and strategy firm. We're on the Australian Financial Review's Fast 100 2 years in a row. I've been involved in over 61 product launches. Love everything product. Love the business of product development, product management. I just get excited about it. Love chatting to folks like Ned. I'm an amateur sausage maker. I love sailing as my kind of extracurricular activities. And so now I want to introduce you to Ned. I've known Ned for a couple of years as an Aussie in the Valley that he is. Ned's had a couple of successful startups that have been acquired. Recently, I guess Ned's got super interested in this passion area for him as well, which is product research and ops. So much so that he's built a company around it, gone through Y-Combinator, and now you're off working with some really interesting companies on this problem as your customers. And I think for me, what I'm really keen to learn about from you, Ned, is what is the forefront of product research ops? What is it? What's it all about? Because I think we're all kind of asking ourselves the same questions as folks in the product community. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Ned, to take us away.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so a little bit more background on me. I'm the founder of Great Question. We put customer research on autopilot, which is everything from surveys, prototype tests, and customer interviews, and then share what you learn with your team all in one place. At the heart of that is we help you build panels. So we'll talk a little bit about building your own customer research panel and research operations. But I do want to be clear that this isn't going to be an infomercial. You don't need our tool to do this stuff. You can do it yourself, or use a bunch of other tools to get this done. So I am originally from Melbourne. I'm losing a bit of my accent, or definitely bringing in a little bit of American twang in now. So you'll have to forgive me for those folks that are in Australia, which I assume is most folks.
And how long have you been in the Valley now for? It's a couple of years, almost a decade or something, right?
Almost a decade. I think it's 9 years now. Next year will be 10. So yeah, came out here with our previous company, Alto, which was a marketplace of web developers. Actually, that's a good foray into, I guess, maybe how we got started. Thanks for the lob.
Unintentional segue. Yeah.
So let me skip slides across. So I'll come back to that story. So today what we're going to cover is we're going to talk a little bit about what is product research ops, how to use product research ops to put your customer research on autopilot. Really, that's about how do we include customers in and research as a part of every product release. We're going to give you some tips for building your own research program, specifically focused on solving some of these big, gnarly product research ops challenges. We'll get some tools and resources. There's going to be 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. Let's keep things moving. So as I was saying, I came out to San Francisco 9 years ago with a previous company. We're a marketplace for web developers where we connected web developers to small business owners to help them build their website online. We didn't do anywhere near enough research, but we didn't realize it at the time. We were talking to customers, they're telling us things, we weren't kind of listening. Thankfully, it all kind of worked out, and we were acquired by GoDaddy in 2015. And the first day I got in there, they said to me, "What's the strategy? What are we doing? What are we building?" And I was like, whoa, hold on a second. Like, I've literally just got in the door. We've got something shaped out, but who are we building for? Who are your customers? At the time, GoDaddy had 14 million small business owners and 1 million web pros, being designers and developers. But I needed to know more about them. Who were they? What were their motivations? What other products were they using? And what right did we have to solve some of their problems? But when I got in there, it took me months to actually find old research reports. There was some great stuff there, but it was just not easily accessible. To get time on the research team's calendar, to get them to help me do more research, took 12 weeks. Even like pulling a list and sending out some communications via marketing was 8 weeks. So like my best asset was actually like me and a stack of Amazon gift cards and a willingness to like cold call people or hit people on Twitter or do whatever I could to do stuff, which is what I'm sure most people on this call, on this webinar are doing. And really, it was that they hadn't built a culture of customer research. Like they didn't make it that it had to be a part of your product development process, that it had to be a part of every release. There were no self-service tools, there were no trainings or guides, and it wasn't expected that you were to do it regularly. So we're on our own. And we did what I now refer to as gonzo research. We made it up as we went along, and it was fine. We got a fair way there, but there's a huge gap there, and it was very easy to fall back to old habits, which is let's just build it and we'll see what customers say, instead of actually let's get this in front of customers, let's deeply understand who they are and make sure we're solving their problems at the core.
And then gonzo research probably do run the risk of creating a bit of friction with some of your colleagues, right? Like, what are you doing talking to I didn't say you could talk to my customers, and yeah.
And it wasn't even, there was that for sure, but there was also someone would go and do some research and be like, hey, we were trying to pick between A and B and we couldn't figure it out. Well, I went and spoke to a customer yesterday and they said B, so let's do B. I'd be like, whoa, you were saying B yesterday, then you found a customer that said B. That's really interesting. Like, how did you ask them? Like, was it leading? Like, there was no trust in the organization. And there were people that were absolutely weaponizing research for their own political gains. So yeah, it was broken. So what is product research ops? This is maybe a more technical definition. I think this came from Nielsen Norman Group. My real definition of product research ops is it's about pulling down all the barriers that stop you from talking to a customer, doing some research, a survey, an interview, a prototype test, bringing down all those barriers so that you can actually do it as part of every release, and really getting to a point where there's no excuses for not doing research. The only excuse really becomes, I didn't want to, because it's so easy. And so it's about systems and processes to reduce the operational burden for people who do research, which is everyone. It's product managers, marketers, designers, and then amplifying the impact and value of that research. So it's not just in your silo, it's actually shared out with the rest of the team. And I think it's actually even more important for people who are not researchers to have great product research operation systems, because it's not a part of your day-to-day. And so it's very easy to default back to bad habits. So this is why it's important. Like the traditional product management piece is build, measure, learn, right? But the problem with this is that building is very expensive, right? It takes a lot of engineering time. Once you put it out there, you've got to support it, you've got to maintain, you've got to improve it. You want to change something, it gets really expensive to do that. It also can deliver a really bad experience. If you're building it, putting it out there, then finding it's the wrong thing, you're treating your customers pretty poorly at that point. The real way to do it is to learn, build, and then measure, is to make sure that you're starting with the customer and understanding their problems, building empathy, and getting confidence in the product, so that you're wrong less often.
This reframing of the loop is just awesome. It's something I think I was saying to you before, thinking about this week. It's like, and I'm just so glad to see it, because when someone else has an idea like this of flipping something around, reframing it, I was sitting there going like, am I a bit crazy? But I think now that you've also arrived at the same conclusion, I've concluded that I'm not as crazy as I thought I might be.
Good. We're both crazy. Yeah.
Or that, yeah. That's also an option.
Yeah. It's funny. Even so, one of our advisors is a guy called Harry Thomas, who founded another Australian in New York, who founded a company called Respondent, which is a great way to go and source potential candidates. They have a panel they will sell access to. He's no longer at the company, but his view is that rather than research reporting into product, which is relatively common, he thinks product should report into research. So he's taken this to the nth degree.
Yeah, interesting. I guess it puts the emphasis on learning.
Totally, exactly.
Which is a huge, like really the key weapon of product, right? And thus the reframing and everything.
Totally. It's the bedrock. And so I want to tell a little bit of story now so I told a GoDaddy story about what it was like with us. We had no research. Now, here's another company, Main Street, and you might not have heard of them. Basically, they're they kind of help you get R&D tax credits, similar to how you have in Australia. In America, there are a ton of these. Every state has them. They're all very different, and it's a fairly sophisticated product, but the output is magic. It takes a lot to get on board, but once you do, this claim on their homepage where get 50 grand plus back from the IRS in 20 minutes is true. We are a customer, only relatively recently became a customer, and within, I don't know, 24 hours, I had over $50,000 put into my bank account, which is phenomenal, especially for an early stage company. Now, I met Vlad, their head of design, who was ex-Gusto, and they're about to launch a new version of their product in January. It's a tax-related product. January is the biggest time of year for them, super important. But he was really nervous because he hadn't got the product in front of any customers, and they were making some pretty big changes. And he just didn't have the capacity. Like, they were burning the candle at both ends, and to go and set up customer interviews or usability tests was just going to be too much. Thankfully, he gave me a little bit of his time, and I asked him the question. I was like, look, if I could get a customer to you at 9 a.m. on Friday morning to go through your current flow and talk out loud about it, give you feedback, whatever, tell you what they didn't understand, would that be valuable? Like, really the question I was asking was, is it about the coordination, the research ops, or is it actually about the actual activity of the research itself? And he was like, if you could do that, that would be amazing. Like, please. It was really about the coordination. So I got him a customer. I found out his ideal customer profile. I got him someone there, 9 a.m. on Friday, and that opened his brain up. He was like, holy cow, this is amazing. They onboarded to our product, and it's not necessarily about our product. They could have done this themselves, but they were able to do 8 customer interviews within 24 hours. And this was over Christmas, over the Christmas break. And the output was they ironed out some fairly gnarly UX bugs, and they were able to launch the product with confidence. So rather than building it, measuring, learning it, learning was maybe in the middle because they hadn't actually released the product yet.
You highlighted like once you're in front of customers, and a whole lot of research has said the number one place for ideas is direct from customers, and getting in front of them, talking to them about it. I know for me, when you do it, like, it's invigorating. You learn something. Sometimes it's not great. You learn something that, like, oh, that thing we're going to do, but you're always like, the improvements you get is amazing. But I think you're about to talk about it as well, but like, what's stopping like company like Main Street or GoDaddy or whoever, like, what are the key things that are stopping people from putting the time in where we all know it needs to go?
Yeah. Are you asking me that question? Is that a question or is that a rhetorical?
It's a question, but I think you're about to answer it, so you can keep.
Yeah, we'll definitely cover that. I mean, I'll cover that in a minute.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's amazing about this Main Street case study is just the impact that it had on the business. So it's actually transformed how they're building product now. And it's made it talking to customers accessible for every product manager, every designer in the organization to go to them early and go to them often, whether it's about doing foundational research and like really understanding what their problems are, whether it's about doing usability testing on an ad hoc basis. But really the disconnect was they didn't have an easy way for someone to press a couple of buttons and start recruiting someone for that study. So asking that question became very difficult. Now, I can't take all the credit, but I'll take a little bit. 3 months after they became a customer, Main Street went and raised $100 million Series A. Their growth is just astronomical. We didn't really play that big a role in it. We didn't really play much at all. It's just a phenomenal team and a phenomenal product. Cool. So how do you put customer research ops on autopilot? Well, these are kind of some of the main stages we see when we think about customer research at this level. One is recruitment, scheduling, and logistics of actually like, how do I find the right customer to talk to? And then how do I get them into a room so I can do the research? Then you've got conducting the research, which kind of doesn't really neatly fit into either of those buckets. And then finally, the synthesis and sharing the insights. So that's more of the knowledge operations. So we care about all these things. We care about everything from recruitment to running the research to the analysis, and see that within the walls of what we're building at Great Question. But we mostly focus on the research ops, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so when we break down research ops, we've also realized that the recruitment part is what takes the most time and energy. It's the most painful thing. Often you're having to go in and pull lists, and you have to learn to write SQL, or go and work with the data and analytics team. Or at GoDaddy, it was both work with the data and analytics team and then work with the marketing team to reach out to these folks. It sucks. And I think that's what really slows most people down. Second is then doing the outreach. So you're on mute, Scott.
Or you got to pay for it as well, right? Is the other, like, you either got to put a lot of time in, and it's slightly annoying, and usually the person doing the research maybe like doesn't know SQL or something like that, or you've got to pay is the other, which is often a barrier for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an expensive problem. Like, how much time do you have to put into it? Then you do the outreach, you do the mail merges, or you send in-app messages, or whatever, however you're going to communicate that. Then if you're lucky enough to get responses, then it's the coordination of like, how we're going to find the time. And then the worst thing that can happen, and I've heard this story again and again, is you spend all this time, hours and hours and hours, doing this stuff, pulling the list, doing the outreach, coordinating, and then you bring all your stakeholders together to go and listen about this customer's story and how they feel about your upcoming roadmap item or whatever it is, and they don't show. And so you've just wasted all that time beforehand, and the people's time for that hour you booked out. It sucks. And then finally, tracking who you've contacted, who participated, so you're not contacting the same people again and again. And so like, I've been here and I know what the default behavior is. The default behavior is, this is too hard. I'm just going to go and call my mate Joey, because he's kind of like our customer. Or I've actually got this little spreadsheet of folks that I talk to. I'm just going to ping them, or I got my buddy on Twitter, or whatever it is, like how you do it. And it's sloppy and you'd get bad outcome.
Look, and the other one that I see is no one bothers. Don't even speak to anyone, just ship something.
90%
it's
of the
almost
time,
easier, right? Like I'll just
Yep.
put it in I'll just ship the feature, see what happens. And it's strange because it's more like expensive as well, riskier.
Totally. It's crazy. Yeah, and I think it's kind of funny to me that, we all know that Paul Graham has that maxim of, talk to customers, build something people want, right? You should be doing that. You should be doing customer research and interviews and all that kind of thing. But it becomes this like special event when actually it should just be a part of your regular process. And when you do it, like you said, you get invigorated and you learn those things. And I often think back to this, the saying of, what happens if we train our employees and they leave us? And it's like, well, what if we don't train them and they stay, right? They're not improving and we're keeping them. I think about it similar with customer discovery. It's like, what if we talk to our customers and they tell us bad things, or they leave us, or they churn because we had that interaction, we give that opportunity to leave us? So what if we don't? What if we don't talk to them and fix the things that suck about the experience, or don't learn about the competitive products they're using? Yeah. So the greatest opportunity in all this, because recruitment is the most painful part of this, is actually building a research panel. The research panel is an opt-in place where folks can sign up to say, yes, I want to participate in research. Yes, I want to influence the direction of this product and have my voice heard. And this is the heart of what we're building at Great Question. Now, we didn't come up with this. Plenty of companies, these are not our customers yet. Plenty of companies before us have built these panels. Zapier, Atlassian, and GitLab are 3 examples of really progressive tech unicorns that put research at the heart of what they're building. And they've all built excellent research panels. In fact, you can Google their research panels and you can find the landing pages. You can go and sign up for them today. But why build a panel? Well, for the customer experience, the participant, it's about giving them a channel for providing product feedback. They're like, I want to change this. I either love the product, I want to give you feedback, or I hate it and I want it to change. Where do I sign up to do that? It also manages consent and communication preferences. Particularly important if you're building in Europe, where GDPR, or California, where CCPA regulations are in place. But it's also just the right thing to do. And it also establishes ground rules, like things like what kinds of research will we do? How frequently will we contact you? Will you get paid What happens to my data? Where does that get stored? All those things matter. But for you and your team, sorry, go, Scott.
I was gonna ask, like, do biases come in? Like, what's your thoughts on biases with a panel? You know, if you got people kind of proactively putting their hands up, clearly they're a bit more, like you said, like they're either motivated because they love what you're doing or because they really are angry about something you're doing, which is both good people to speak to. Don't get me wrong, but maybe you're also missing those, like, you know, the great big in the middle that are kind of like indifferent.
Totally.
Is that something you got to look out for? How does that factor into a panel?
Yeah, look, it's tough. It's tough to like remove all biases from this. In fact, I'd say it's impossible to do completely. The one way we've seen of effective way of building panels is actually use net promoter scores and reach out to not just the promoters, but also the detractors. And then even trying to do a split to make sure that we get an even mix in the representative sample you're doing for your survey or your prototype test or whatever that is. So you can make sure you're getting both. There's a similar concerns around providing incentives, and I'll talk a little bit about incentives in a minute. But do you provide an incentive? Or actually, we don't want to do that because we want to find people who are intrinsically motivated to give us feedback. It's like, sure, but you're going to get the boosters then. The detractors, you know, they're not going to do it. They're like, pay me, get out of here. So you can only do your best to reduce the bias. The benefit of a panel in this context is it allows you to understand who we contacting, who are they, like deeply, like how do they use our product, what's their net promoter score, where are they coming from? Also, when was the last time you spoke to them? If you're talking to the same people again and again, which is pretty common, you're going to introduce a ton of bias because they're like, you're Scott. They're like, oh, it's Scott. I love talking to Scott. He's great. And so you're like, he's my buddy. It's like, that's not really what I'm looking to do here. And so these are other things that you get to rule out by building a panel. But the real benefit I see for the teams that are using panels is actually, one, you're making it easy to do your research. You've got people here, you can select them all and invite them. Two, you're increasing your response rates. We've seen through our test that you'll get an average 60% increase in reply rates to your recruitment emails than if you're going through a mass list. And then your show rates, people actually showing up, they're far more likely to show up, 100% more likely to show up than if you don't do it this way. But everyone I'm sure that's had a no-show knows how painful that is, how expensive that is. And the average customers are saving about 5 hours a week by using a panel instead of their old methods. And so how do we do this? Well, there's 4 elements. The first is we create landing pages. This is about setting the context, making sure people understand what the hell are they signing up for. The second is screener surveys. So this is basically a series of questions you're going to ask customers to identify if they're a good fit for your panel, and then what persona they fall into. So you can say, cool, for this study, we want to talk to B2B users, particularly that come from the financial services sector. Great. Well, let's make sure that we're asking those questions in our screener survey so we can filter find the right candidates. The third is a place to store these people and store when they're contacted, what they were contacted, what they told us, continue to build up a rich profile about these folks. And the final, and I think this is actually maybe one of the most important, or maybe we should put it as number 1, is guides and templates. Don't make me think. Like Steve Krug, that was the first book that really got me into doing design and user experience and product. Don't make me think. Give me the email templates I'm going to send to folks when I'm going to recruit them. Give me the email templates I'm going to send when I'm thanking them and sending them an incentive. Give me the landing page templates. Give me a guide on how to conduct a great interview. Just make it easy for me so I don't need to go and Google this stuff.
I think the other thing templates give you is consistency around questioning. You know, you raised that thing before of like someone went and interviewed and got the exact result they wanted from the interview. You know, if you've got that format there, then you can trust if you've got a team doing interviews over time, or even just yourself over time, you're asking the same questions. So you're kind of getting the same context, the same information. So you can do comparisons. So you're not introducing like biases or whatever. You can tweak and improve your questions. I think that's a big one as well, just that consistency.
100%, absolutely. And so landing pages can be pretty simple. This is Atlassian's landing page for their recruitment page. GitLab's is equally simple. And you could use anything for this. You could use Webflow, you could create a custom page if you wanted to, whatever you want. But I do think it's important to set the context here. The screener surveys, they can be as basic or as detailed as you like. The real question I always ask is like, what are the personas that you might get in your panel, or you might want to talk to? Let's make sure there's questions to go and filter those people out or in. So when I think about that, I think about things like role types. Are they an administrator? Are they are they a creator? Are they observer sort of type seat? What's their job title? That might be helpful for filtering. Organization size, funding stage. These are some of the things that we care about.
And just to clarify, Ned, like what you're talking about here is for your panel having a bit of a solution, if you will, some technology, everything to make it easier for your panel. So you're sending them a landing page where they can read about it, learn about it. You're then sending a bit of a survey that when they're like, yeah, I want to participate, you're getting that context to help you either ask better questions or not have to ask the basics every time you're talking to someone. And and you're going, that's what the screener survey is about, right? To help you with the panel,
exactly.
Give some clarity.
Exactly. It's just building up a little bit of a profile about who that person is, so you know that they're worth talking to for that particular research you're doing. And it could just be a Google form. Lots of people use Google Forms for their screener surveys. And there is on our blog, there's a bunch of screener survey templates. You can grab those if you're looking for examples. All this then gets stored into your candidate database, which could just be a Google Sheet, or an Airtable is another common way to do this. This allows you to just filter and contact the people that you want. If you want to get particularly fancy, you can add filters in to stop you from contacting people, in a certain time period, or get them to participate in a study in a particular time period, things like that. Who contacted them? What did you learn? And then finally, the guides and templates. So there's tons of these sort of things out there. We are going to be emailing out our product research ops guide at the end of this, which has a ton more information in here than we're covering today. If you're looking to go deep on that, you can find that. And we service them in our product as well, for what it's worth. So some quick tips for building a research program. First is on recruitment. How are you going to find these folks that you want to go and talk to? Well, first of all, you've got your existing customer base. Assuming you've got some customers, you could write SQL, you've got a mixed panel, you can set it through MailChimp. That's pretty common. We have an intercom integration. So we do a pop-up in our product to say, hey, we're doing some research around this. Then you might want to go and find prospects or non-customers. So we've seen people post screeners out to Craigslist, is pretty common. Put it on Twitter, or post it to Slack groups. Great source of customers. It's like, where do your customers live online? Are they in Facebook groups? Let's go and find them and then post, hey, look, we're trying to talk to you about X topic. We're paying this incentive. If you're interested, fill in our screener survey. And if you're a fit, we'll reach out and schedule some time with you. You could do cold outreach on LinkedIn, which I personally love, or Twitter. It's like easy to get into someone's inbox and say, look, again, we're doing some research. I'm not trying to sell you anything. And then finally, there are paid channels. So if you don't have customers yet, or you're really looking for those non-customers of yours, then go into places like user interviews. They have a great panel, particularly for consumer. Respondent.io has an excellent panel for business to business. And user testing is pretty good. Their panel is actually getting much better, although it's quite expensive. It's like a $40,000 ACV to start using that.
ACV being annual contract price. So 40
annual contract value. Yeah, thank you. Exactly, thank you. Pull me up on my acronyms. And so the next thing is, so there are a bunch of places you can go and find your customers and where they live or prospects. And I can talk more about recruiting if there's any questions afterwards. The next is incentives. I thoroughly recommend you pay incentives. The main reason you should pay an incentive is because you value your customers' time. But it also makes you put a value on the research you're doing. Like how much you want, try to answer this question. What does it actually mean to you? Asking 5 customers, deeply understanding 5 customers, how they want to build an integration. And you're going to pay them maybe $50 a piece to do that, $250. $250 feels cheap to build the right product with confidence and build the less wrong product, more importantly, versus like, that's like an hour of an engineer's time or a couple of hours of engineer's time. Like, hell yes, every time. I also think it's an ethical thing to do. It will absolutely increase show rates. People are actually more likely to show up if you're paying them some kind of financial incentive. And I recommend either paying them cash or as close to cash as possible, either cash or a gift card or even a charitable donation. Thoroughly recommend doing an incentive. Happy to answer questions on that and even how to structure those. And here are some of the common problems that people face. So one, you got customer success is like, you can't talk to our customers because I'm worried you're going to talk to them and they're going to churn, or you're going to say the wrong thing and they're going to not like it, or I don't know, you need to come through me. My answer to that is similar to what I said before. The worst thing you can do is not talk to these customers and understand what their needs are. This is another benefit of actually building the panel. You're basically saying this is an opt-in relationship between the product development team and the customer. The customer success person isn't a part of that relationship. You can definitely let them know, you can ask them to participate as well, but you shouldn't allow them to get in the way, is my view. Maybe a little bit controversial.
I think the other one is like, in making it business as usual in the way that you're talking about is another key kind of factor here, because when it's not BAU, the key kind of thing that I've seen teams run into is it starts becoming bigger than Ben-Hur, and you get into this big almost like big project that you're running. It then gets escalated. It gets escalated like to your VPs or your heads of kind of level and your director levels, and then they've got to escalate it because it's across teams. And before you know it, like the CEO is involved in, can we interview some customers or not? And now I've seen that happen surprisingly quite often in larger organizations, and that's not where you want to be at. And I think by making it a business as usual thing, where it's a normal thing for us to interview our customers about our product, that fear factor starts to disappear, because it's like, cool, one person might say something bad, but we're chatting to them all the time, and it's just part of what we do. And I think one of the big things is just overcoming that fear factor by making it a normal thing that we do.
Totally. Love that. Absolutely. The other problem is there's a risk of over contacting customers or burning out your list. And this particularly happens if you've got a really small list. I was recently chatting to an Australian company actually, and they're about 500 people, but they'll go to the founders and say, hey, do you know anyone we can talk to? And the founders networks are tapped, right? They know lots and lots of people, but it's still a finite list. And so you need to find multiple ways to go and recruit folks so it's big enough that you can get the volume of research you need without having to contact the same people again and again. There's also often a lack of coordination between teams. And so what we see there is multiple teams will be doing research, but they've all got their own spreadsheets. And often they'll be the same customers on the same spreadsheets. And so they'll say, look, I just spoke to someone else on your team yesterday. I told them all about that. Like, you guys don't talk? Like, what the hell? What's going on? And that sucks, because you really want to wring every last drop out of every one of those interactions. They're so valuable. So if you coordinate between teams, and you can do that, you can double up. No-show rates, super common. Incentives will generally solve a lot of that. Getting people to opt into a panel will generally solve that. And then doing research in a silo. So kind of a similar thing to a lack of coordination. Here, I'm mostly talking actually about the lack of sharing the output, not necessarily the contact. It's like this insight, this interview, if you're doing the interview and you're going through a script, you're doing it rigorously, those insights are so valuable. You should be sharing them throughout the organization. Create a shared research Slack channel, things like that.
And Ned, is there like a kind of upper or lower limit? If you've got 5 customers, should you be thinking about this panel approach? If you've got I'm just curious, are there kind of, probably it's the lower limit, like you got to have some minimum, or is there no minimum and you should be thinking about it almost from day one if it's a new product or a new business or something?
I think about doing it from day one. Like, it definitely gets more valuable the larger it goes. But the idea that, let's say you've got 5 customers, you're assuming you're doing founder-led growth, and you're the one out there going talking to them to recruit them. Just establishing that framework by saying, hey, I would love to add you to our customer research panel, or our customer research council, you might call it. And what that means is, I want to talk to you regularly. I'm going to run new product ideas by you. I want to get your feedback on the product. I want to build it for your use case. And that just language that just unlocks a bunch of goodwill from that customer.
And what about you know, a lot of companies as well, especially in the B2B space, there might be huge businesses, but they mainly have a small number of customers. How do you think about panel? You know, you mentioned the council. Do you think about it in that context as well?
Yeah, for sure. It's another good, slightly separate bucket. I think it's even more important for those customers. So if you've got 5 really big customers, one of the challenges we see in a lot of those businesses is there'll be a primary point of contact, and they'll be connected to the account exec, but they might not necessarily be the person on the front line actually using the product.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do you get to those people? Well, you need to create a language to go and connect to those people and say, you might go to your AE and say your account exec and say, we're building this panel. Would you mind sharing this link and this text with your contact of the other organization, and let them know we want to talk to every layer down? And that gives them something to forward along. You can do pop-ups in the product to recruit them, but everyone's aware of what you're doing, and it is in this research context.
It's super interesting in the research context because one thing I've definitely seen in those situations is the exec, for whatever reason, has sometimes a poor perception of what's going on. When you get into it, and if you've got real feedback from the team's loving the product, or like loving the service they're being provided, and that's great. But you know, there's a sales benefit here to being able to surface, well, hey, what, you know, in a methodical way, rather than just like, oh, Barry says we're actually doing a good job, like the product's working really well. It's like, well, no, Barry or Sally or whatever is saying, here's their feedback on it that the AE can share with the account executive, can share with their key contact at the customer. So yeah, super interesting. I'll let you keep going.
No, I think that's a great point, because I think it's you're demonstrating that the output of research isn't just necessarily about going into design, like usability, or product going to prioritization, or marketing going to promotion, but it can be used by sales teams. It can be used by everyone, where they might be like, cool, actually, that was a great story. Can we do a testimonial with you? Would you let us do a case study?
Yeah,
share that.
We are doing research in one of our joint venture businesses, and every week with our user interviews, we get a new case study that we're like, every time we're just like, put it in the sales deck, because they are just fantastic examples and use cases that when your buyer hears the exact, because it's an enterprise kind of product, they go, oh wow, I didn't know it was useful for that. This is fantastic. But it's the multitude of stories that's really starting to come together as a result of continuous interviewing.
Exactly. Yep. Awesome. So I thought I'd tell a little bit of story about how do we actually use this? A great question. So we have a few processes set up. We have a standing meeting every Thursday where we automatically schedule a new customer on to hear their story and run them by the latest thinking. And there's always questions that come out of one of our like prioritization meetings or some other meeting that we're like, cool, let's make sure we ask that on Thursday. So that's great. We do a couple of ad hoc interviews per week. I will schedule those, or everyone pretty much is doing research all the time. We're a pretty small team. There's 6 of us now. We have open invites for sales and success calls. So I onboarded 2 new people today onto the team. I was like, cool, here's my calendar. Here's all the things that are coming up this week. I want to join this one. They can see my calendar at any time if they want to opt into things. We have a KPI, and we stole this from Zapier, which is you need to be spending 2 hours a week with our customers. So that everyone has to do that, whether that's on sales calls, doing success calls, or even ticketing is a part of that, or participating in interviews. There's an easy win, which is the hour on Thursdays. But then we also make it easy for anyone to go and view previous research. We have a repository. People can go and watch interviews or see notes or see surveys. And then we make it easy for anyone to spin up a new study, to go and ask a new question, because the panel's there. We've set the cadence. There's all these guardrails in place, which mean they can't ever contact anyone. There's a budget for incentives we give everyone. So there's no like ever question of that, can I do this? Just do it. And we have guides and training so that if people go, how do I do this again? All that information is there. We recently, oh, sorry.
Well, was this a nervous, for you as the founder, is this a nervous, and I imagine some managers and execs feel the same, like, was this a nervous moment for you to say, you know what, it's one way of hearing it is like, it's a free for all, everyone, just go ask me. Was that, talk me through that psychologically.
So I think, to be honest, it was a relief. It meant that I didn't need to be the sole voice of the customer, right? Like, and I'm providing some feedback on a mock, and that's fine. But it's I've only got my narrow view as well. Like getting engineer. So I'm from a product background. I'm a marketer. I'm a business guy. Getting an engineer in front of a customer. And the customer says, oh yeah, this really sucks. He's like, well, if we just move that button and we change the name of it, maybe we let it do another action when you press that button, would that solve it? They're like, yeah, great. He's like, oh, cool, I've just done that, it's deployed. So like everyone comes from these different angles. So to be honest, it was more of a relief. And I think there's a natural, I guess maybe I'm cynical here, like I'm generally an optimist, maybe I'm cynical here, which is that I think there's a natural break which exists, which is that no one has the energy to spend 8 hours a day talking to customers. No one has that energy to go and like abuse by over talking to customers. So I'm not really worried about it.
Cool.
Yeah. Funny question. And so just as we wrap up, I wanted to share this quote from Jared Spool, who is just an amazing guy. If you're not following him on Twitter, I haven't read one of his books or checked out his blog or one of his talks, which are amazing. But his view is, if you're not doing customer research frequently enough, you might as well not be doing it at all. And in all the teams that he's worked with, teams who did research once a quarter struggled virtually the same as teams who didn't do any research at all. And so what this is really saying is, research shouldn't be this special event that you do once a quarter or once a year, that big survey you go and send out to see if we've got product market fit, or a series of interviews because you're thinking about maybe some new thing. It needs to be a part of every product release. And the only way to do that is to build an efficient product operations process that makes it so there's never any excuse that stops you from doing research. Yeah. So that basically wraps us up. We're going to share at the end a guide, these notes, this video, a guide to research operations we've put together working with actually the research operations manager at Patreon. You get a free trial for the website, 14 days. I don't want to talk my own book too much. You can check out more guides at greatquestion.co/blog. 2 books I thoroughly recommend. The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick is awesome and just really great at helping to frame questions in a non-leading way. That's the primary purpose of that book. And then Teresa Torres, who was, I think, here last month.
We'll have the link out to the video with Teresa as well. If you don't want to read the book, you can watch her give the talk.
Yeah, she's amazing. So continuous discovery habits there. And with that, I think we can throw to questions.
Yeah, we'll give it a second. Are there any questions anyone's got for Ned or myself around research, product research, and research ops? While we're waiting, I took a few notes, which I thought were pretty good. Like, I love that the quote around transforming that one where it says, what if we don't train our employees and they stay? I love that. Like, what if I can't remember the exact wording that you had, but like, what if we don't interview our customers and you probably got better wording, right?
Yeah.
And they leave, and they leave, and they leave, or we ship the wrong thing. It's a good quote. And then just another one from me, which is, what's kind of the minimum panels? We spoke about it a bit, but like, when you're thinking about like number of interviews or something to get meaning, do you think about number of interviews you should be doing rather than just 1 or 2?
I think it depends. So I think there's two things there. What is the minimum panel size? I said, 0, basically. I was like, start from day one. But actually to have like a proper process set up around it, and a database and all that kind of stuff, you maybe don't need to really do that until you're sort of at this, 30, 40, 50, heading up 100 customers, I think in general, or 100 users, I would say. 100 people that you want.
What about at a larger scale where you've got, let's say, 2 million customers and you're thinking about like, what does my panel size need to be representative? Are those the kind of questions someone should be asking? Or, because that's almost a bit of a black hole in itself. Or do you kind of say like,
Yes.
we'll just start at 10 and get going? Like, what do you see the best teams do at scale when they're thinking about their panel size?
So when I think about at scale, you're really trying to recruit as many people as you possibly can, and making sure that you're getting that information so you can split them. Now, you're going to have some segments of customers that are going to be harder to recruit than others. So B2B traditionally is more challenging to get to B2C. And then administrator is much more challenging to recruit than someone else within the organization that may be a regular user. And so it kind of depends on your research requirements. Like, where do we need a representative audience? What are the personas that we need more of or less of? What is the product direction that we're currently going in? So those are the things I would think about. I think the other you asked also about sample sizes. So I'm not an expert on this, but my general take of most of the work that I'm doing, which is so actually I'll back it up a little bit. It generally depends on what is the magnitude of the decision you're about to make. Is it something pretty trivial? What color button should this be? Or is it something pretty significant? We're making a massive pivot, and once we turn that door, we can't close it again.
Or we're about to invest in an entirely new line of product that in a market that we haven't really dealt with before. Yeah, I see where you're going with it. Yeah, as to how statistically correct you want to be. Like, if it's just a button color, do whatever, who cares? Almost. But if we're just about to invest $5 million and put a couple of teams onto something for the next 2 years, when you're talking at scale, then you probably want to be a bit statistically accurate with your research. Yeah, interesting. I'm gonna there's a couple of questions from the audience, so I'll jump in. There's one from Ewan, which says, how do you use your own model to develop great questions?
Like how do we, so assume that means how do we use our product in this model for building our own product? So I'll give you an example. We were recently building, we had a lot of requests for integrations, and we'd pushed it down as far as we could. We'd built a really killer CSV import. It's like, I'm really proud of it, but we're like, it's still not the same as having data automatically piped in. And there are a few things we could do. We could do Zapier, which got us a lot of things. We could do a Salesforce. We could do Segment. There are a few sort of other options out there. Like, which one do we do? And so we spun up a quick survey, and we sent it to a few customers to see what they thought. Like, which were these databases do you currently use? Was one of the questions. What data would you like to import? What data would you like to export? What are these integration platforms would you use? Things like Segment and Zapier and whatnot, Salesforce. It was like 5 questions. It would have taken like 2 minutes to fill out. We then promoted that, emailed it to some folks, and then promoted it via a banner using Intercom in our product. And within a couple of hours or a day, we had, 20 responses, something like that. And that helped us really narrow down that actually Zapier was probably the clear winner in this case. There were a bunch of people that wanted Salesforce and Segment, but really it was Zapier the majority. And we could look up who those customers were and see that those are the bigger accounts and blah, blah, blah. And then we scheduled calls with those people. They were in our panel. Hey, can we set up some time? Book time with them in a couple of clicks through the product, and understand better about how the integration would work, data in and out. And then that allowed us to build a Zapier integration, which actually just went live last week. And we're like, cool. Now we know who we're going to go and talk to. We want to do Segment integration. We're going to talk to and do Salesforce integration, which is basically set up our roadmap for the integration path of our product development.
Cool, awesome. Next question is from Red, which says, what's your process of doing remote user testing? Any do's or don'ts?
So I've only ever really done remote user testing, and I assume that you're referring to moderated, so synchronous, where you're actually talking to a customer, and we use that for foundational research, where we're doing like really trying to understand some new problem, like maybe integrations could be that, how people do integrations. We also do it for usability testing. So when we're doing more like evaluative, like is this design versus that design, this layout, how does this work, that kind of thing. I think our main things are, I always have a script. So that's key to keep you on track and make sure that you're asking all the questions that you've decided to ask with the team, and it gets collaborative on creating that. I always make sure that I have another participant with me, so another like kind of teammate with me, because we might hear different things and they might have alternate questions to ask, particularly if I get like the designer or an engineer or someone like that, so they've got their own perspectives. I always pay incentives. I use Calendly, or we have a Calendly integration. I use our GCal integration to book things. I store my notes in one place, get the video transcribed and share that out with the team, and make sure that I'm regularly touching on that. So, hey guys, you saw all the interviews, they got pushed to a shared Slack channel, but then in our planning or in our prioritization session, I'll be like, hey, just a quick summary. Here are the things I learned. Do a little recap and people can ask me additional questions. Yeah, so that's how I think about that.
Cool, thanks for that, Ned. Any other, we've answered 2 questions. Are there any other questions from audience? So just give it a minute or two. And there's a whole bunch of, while we're waiting, there's just a whole bunch of good stuff here, Ned. This is awesome. Thanks for sharing with us a lot of your insights over your career, and now a great question. It's super interesting stuff. I think it'll be great to see you're almost like democratizing the great kind of research work that a Zapier or an Atlassian can do because of their scale and the systems they've built. So I think it's a great thing for every team to have. And I just know from experience, like, you go to run an interview campaign, and half the battle is just getting everyone motivated to do all the the coordination. Everyone knows it, but they're just like, oh man, I got to send all those emails and set up times, and that's half the battle, right? All right, we got another question here, which is, we've introduced from Colette, we've introduced a regular research cycle. However, the insights are often dismissed. What is key for researchers so they have credibility around the recommendations they propose? That is a super awesome question.
That's a great question. Zing. I think there's a couple of things here. One, I think about you want to bring the team along for the ride. And so it's not just about being, the lone person that's going out there and doing the research and coming back and be like, guys, I've done it. Here's the report. This is the direction we should be going in. Even in the early stages of planning what research you're going to do, what are the questions you're going to ask? And what area of the product do you even care about going and asking questions? And getting input from other people on the team about that is going to mean that they're bought into that process, and they're feeling heard. And then when you're actually doing the interviews, following that script, and making sure that you're not asking leading questions, and that you're covering all the bases that people want to ask, I would also suggest to be sharing out the insights as you're learning them. So rather than doing a big bang report at the end, it's like, I spoke to these 3 people today, and here were the good things they said, here were the challenging things they said, here are the additional questions we've decided to include in the interview. If you want to go and watch them, you can watch them here, but here's my summary. And then the final thing I would say is, I think video is such a powerful medium when it comes to sharing these insights. It's one thing for you to say, we learned X, Y, and Z. We asked these questions, we learned X, Y, and Z. But actually saying to someone, go and watch this video, just watch one thing. It'll take you 20 seconds. It's minute 220 to minute 240, where they talk about the specific problem that we've been struggling with internally. Just hear what they've got to say. And whenever we do that, the team just rallies. It's like instant. Oh my gosh, I'd never thought about it like that. I didn't realize how painful it was. Like the language you get out of that. So those are some of the processes I would think about. I am not a formal UX researcher, If you're wanting to get more deeper into that, I think Teresa Torres's book is fantastic. And feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you to some folks as well.
Thanks for that. We've got about 3 minutes left. So I think we're going to wrap up now, unless someone kind of jumps in with a question at the last minute. But look, Ned, thanks so much for having us. You can find Ned on Twitter, find him by email. It's up here. And like Ned said on the call, we'll be sending out that you'll be able to rewatch the video, share it with people. There's going to be a few kind of templates, a bit of a guide that we send out, and we'll also be sending a link to that interview that I did with Teresa Torres about a month or so ago. But look, it's been awesome hearing from you, Ned, about product ops, the latest in product research. Thanks so much, everyone that joined us, and chat to you all next time. See you, folks.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone. Bye.